Welcome to the Clinical Education Initiative podcast, Conversations with CEI, where we feature conversations with clinical experts, their experience and insights on current health issues in the areas of HIV, primary care and prevention, sexual health, hepatitis C, and drug user health.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the CEI HIV Primary Care and Prevention podcast. I'm Tony Urbina, Medical Director of CEI's HIV Primary Care and Prevention Center of Excellence, Professor of Medicine at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai, and someone who just got back from Denver, Colorado, a little tired, a little altitude adjusted, but honestly energized by everything I saw and heard. I was just at CROI 2026. That's the conference on retroviruses and opportunistic infections, which ran February 22nd through 25th. If you've never been, Denver in February is cold, beautiful, and absolutely packed with the best HIV science in the world. This is the conference I look forward to every year because it's where the field sets its direction, where the data will shape what we do in clinic over the next 12 months, actually all gets presented here at CROI. And I'll be honest, this year had a different energy. Yes, the science was remarkable, but there was also a real reckoning happening in that room about the political moment we're in. We'll talk about that, but let's start with the good stuff because there was a lot of it. Let me start with what everyone was talking about in the hallways, in the plenary hall, and frankly, at the bar after sessions, the impact of federal funding cuts on HIV care and research. There was an entire session called, and I love this title, Sleepless in Denver, Impact of Funding Changes on HIV Care. It's a little tongue-in-cheek, but it captured the anxiety in the room. We're talking about cuts to USAID, threats to PEPFAR, withdrawal of federal support for domestic HIV programs. And the message from the podium was clear. These are not just policy decisions. They are decisions that threaten decades of infrastructure. Decades. Peter Staley, an activist legend who's been fighting since the ACT UP days, got up and spoke about the political assault on science. And Linda Gale Becker from the Desmond Tutu HIV Center in Cape Town delivered one of the opening lectures, reminding us that collaborative prevention only works when the systems to deliver it are sustained. What struck me personally standing in that room is how interconnected it all is. The science is advancing at a breathtaking pace. I'm going to tell you about that in a minute, but none of it really matters if the delivery infrastructure crumbles. One presenter put it simply, community power has to be funded, not just praised. I wrote that down, and I think about that for our programs at Mount Sinai all the time. Okay, so let's pivot to the science because this is where I genuinely got excited. Those of you who follow our podcast know I've been deeply involved in lenacapavir since its approval for PrEP last June. So I was naturally glued to the lenacapavir data at CROI this year. The resistance data from Purpose 1 and Purpose 2 was presented, and this is where it gets nuanced. And I think it's important for clinicians to understand the full picture rather than a simplified take-home. Across both trials combined, there were 5 total HIV infections among participants taking lenacapavir. There were 2 in Purpose 1 and 3 in Purpose 2. In Purpose 1, one participant acquired HIV at study day 365 and had the N74D capsid resistance mutation. That's what we expect in the setting of waning drug levels and functional monotherapy. The other acquired HIV at study day 670, more than a year after their final dose, and importantly, no resistance was observed there. In Purpose 2, 2 previously reported participants had the N749 substitution, again in a waning drug level context, but there was also a newly identified case that developed a Q67H and a K70R, a different resistance pattern, and one that raises questions we just don't have full answers to yet. So the message isn't simply that all resistance emerged from low drug levels. The picture is more complex. What we can say is that lenacapavir remains extraordinarily effective, just 5 infections across nearly 4,400 participants is a remarkable efficacy signal. But the resistance profile is something the field is actively working to understand, and it's why adherence to the injection schedule matters so much. But here's what really got me leaning forward in my seat. Gilead presented the design of a phase 3 trial of once-yearly intramuscular lenacapavir for PrEP. This is Purpose 365. The plan is a single-arm, open-label study in 300 people using a 3,000 milligram intramuscular dose supported by population pharmacokinetic modeling. They've identified oral loading doses on day 1 and day 2 to ensure adequate coverage from the start. Think about that. Once a year for HIV prevention. If that works, and the pharmacokinetic modeling suggests it can, the access implications globally are profound. One presenter put global PrEP uptake in sharp perspective. Only 2.3 million people are currently on oral PrEP worldwide, and injectable cabotegravir and lenacapavir together represent less than 4% of all PrEP use. We have so far to go, and a once-yearly option could really be transformative for populations who struggle with any recurring healthcare contact. One more practical note for prescribers. Gilead presented a real-world drug-drug interaction analysis. It was poster 1062, looking at over 457,000 PrEP users in the US. The headline is reassuring. Only 0.5 would have needed a lenacapavir dose modification, and the vast majority of patients on concomitant meds had no clinically significant interactions expected. The one category to flag, about 11% of PrEP users were on erectile dysfunction medications, tadalafil or sildenafil, which do require monitoring and possible dose adjustment. That's not surprising given our patient population, but something every prescriber needs to address up front. So run your patient's med list through the Liverpool drug-drug interaction checker before you prescribe. Now, shifting to the treatment side, I think the theme was clear. The era of ultra-long-acting therapy is arriving faster than many of us expected. Gilead presented late-breaking data from the Artistry-1 and Artistry-2 phase 3 trials. These are studies of a single-tablet regimen combining bictegravir and lenacapavir for treatment. Remember, bictegravir, lenacapavir as a combination is still investigational, but the efficacy and safety results from people who switch from existing suppressive therapy were presented, and the data looks strong. This could eventually be a meaningful option for people who need simplified regimens or who have specific tolerability concerns. Gilead also presented 96-week results from the islatravir plus lenacapavir phase 2 study. This has the potential to be the first ever weekly oral HIV treatment regimen. Weekly, not daily. For many of my patients, a weekly pill would be a game changer. And then there's data that came from ViiV. And I want to talk about VH184. This is their third generation integrase inhibitor, and CROI was the first time we saw first in human phase 1 data on long-acting injectable formulations. If the pharmacokinetics bear out in larger studies, we could be looking at a 4-month dosing interval for HIV treatment. 4 months. Cabenuva already changed the game by going to every 2 months. So 4-month dosing would be another leap. They also presented 12-month data on lotivibart, a broadly neutralizing antibody given every 4 months in combination with monthly cabotegravir in the EMBRACE study. The broadly neutralizing antibodies plus integrase inhibitor combination approach is fascinating to me because it really leverages both immunologic and pharmacologic mechanisms. And staying on the broadly neutralizing antibody theme, Gilead also presented patient-reported outcomes from their LTZ regimen. So that's lenacapavir combined with the 2 broadly neutralizing antibodies, teripavimav and zinlervimab, all given every 6 months. I want you to think about that for a moment. A complete HIV treatment regimen, twice a year, no daily pills. That is the holy grail we've been working towards. This is still investigational, and there's an important catch. Patients need to be pre-screened for viral susceptibility to both of these antibodies. And only about half of those screened in earlier studies were sensitive to both. So it won't be for everyone, but for the right patient, a twice-yearly treatment regimen would be genuinely transformative. And I can't leave this segment without talking about Merck's late-breaking data on doravirine islatravir or DOR-ISL combination. 3 phase 3 trials, and the headline is significant. This is the first non-integrase inhibitor, 2-drug regimen to demonstrate non-inferiority to Biktarvy, both in treatment-naive patients at week 48 and in virologically suppressed patients switching at week 96. The clinically meaningful differentiator here is that it's integrase sparing. For patients where we have concerns about long-term integrase exposure, whether that's weight, metabolic issues, or just a preference for a different mechanism, having a potent, non-INSTI 2-drug option is a real addition to our toolkit. And the PDUFA date is in April 28th of this year, so this could be available to us later this year. Now, shifting a little bit to STIs and doxypep and what's happening on the ground, Janine Marazzo, CEO of IDSA, and someone I have a lot of respect for, gave a plenary on STI prevention and treatment that I found really important for primary care providers. The doxypep data continues to show clear benefit for reducing syphilis amongst gay, bisexual, and other men who have sex with men and transgender women. That tracks with what we're seeing in our clinic. But Marazzo made an important point. The effect doesn't translate equally across all populations, and congenital syphilis rates continue to rise. That's a public health emergency that really doesn't get enough attention. And on gonorrhea, resistant gonorrhea remains a serious challenge. 2 newly approved antibiotics offer some hope. If you're not already familiar with zoliflodacin and gepotidacin, I encourage you to look them up. These are new mechanisms of action that we haven't had in gonorrhea treatment for decades. And I'd be doing CROI a disservice if I didn't touch on cure research, because that was a major thread running through the whole conference. Kevin Saunders from Duke gave a compelling plenary on HIV vaccine design, outlining how germline targeting approaches to broadly neutralizing antibodies are progressing, and how artificial intelligence and machine learning are being used to identify key mutations. The field is moving, slowly, but moving. On the cure side, more broadly, the key theme, and I found this intellectually satisfying, is that combination strategies are going to be necessary. Strengthening immune response plus directly targeting the viral reservoir. Kate Fisher presented data showing that autologous neutralizing antibodies and CD8 responses can suppress viral rebound, but viral escape emerges around 2 years. The conclusion: no single approach will be sufficient. Layers are needed, and all of this is humbling but also clarifying. So what's my overall take from CROI 2026? The science has never been more exciting. The pipeline for both prevention and treatment is genuinely remarkable. Once-yearly PrEP, 4 to 6 month treatment intervals, weekly oral regimen, broadly neutralizing antibody combinations. We are in an era of expanding choice for our patients, and that is a privilege to witness and also to be part of. At the same time, none of it matters if we can't deliver it. The funding crisis is real, the political headwinds are real, and the communities we serve are watching to see whether we'll fight for them. I believe we will. I'm Tony Urbina. Thank you for listening. We'll be back soon with more updates from the field. In the meantime, stay engaged, stay current, and take care of yourselves and your patients.
Thank you for tuning in. Join us next time for a new episode of Conversations with CEI. Visit us at ceitraining.org and follow us on CEI social media platforms.